Yo, what's going on, Regeneration? John Das here with a very special episode of Carl Hayden Smith. Carl is a pioneer of consciousness, the founder of the Museum of Consciousness, a professor of media at the University of East London, who is sitting down and opening us into the field of hyperhumanism. Now, if you haven't heard this term before, get this. This is a new field of study that expands our ability to not only perceive the world around us, but also to develop altered traits in ourselves, effectively expanding our capacity of what it means to be human. If you're interested in the transhumanist movement or curious about the role of AI, of psychedelics, or of different consciousness-altering technologies, you will love this show. Leave us a 5-star review, share with anyone you think this may help, and stay tuned for a much longer, full-length episode for paid subscribers, recorded directly in Portugal in a regenerative village during our AM Ascension New Earth Leadership Retreat. We'll see you on the other side. Peace.
Carl, what an honor, brother. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really good, thanks. I'm very excited to connect with you boys and to see where we can ascend and incend. So how do we both go upwards and inwards?
Amazing. Man, well, for those who haven't had the pleasure of getting to know you, who are you and what are you doing on this planet?
I'm exploring my birthright, which is to explore consciousness, and I'm doing it from as many angles as possible. So I'm basically just with Luke, who's sitting there with you. We're mapping out the territory. We're going from different perspectives, as many different cultures as possible. Whether it's endo technologies, which are your inner technologies, whether it's the traditional medicines that we all, well, not all of us, some of us have access to, or whether it's the cyberdelics in all their guises, whether that's flicker light or sound or mixed reality, or binaural beats. So yeah, really combining these into stacks, into Holotechnica. So Holotechnica is holo in the Greek is to combine into the whole, and technica is techne. So how do we combine these different techniques to reach altered traits rather than altered states? So I think we've spent a lot of time chasing our tails, reaching the next peak experience, but how do we really show that we're creating lasting change, not just for ourselves, but for the societies around us?
Love it, man. Well, how did you guys get connected, man? How do you all know each other?
It was in Berlin, right?
Berlin, but we still don't know exactly how. Oh, it's probably one of my talks on hyperhumanism, I suspect. But I think you came up to me afterwards and you were like, just send me anywhere, like utilize me as a vessel.
That's what I said, yeah. This is the future. Sounds like the Protosaurus.
So yeah, what was it? Like, what was it about Carl and his work that really hooked you?
The question, what does it mean if we are not even human yet? What culture can we create if we tap into that power within that we don't even know what it is, that maybe our ancestors knew from indigenous tribes around the world, but we have numbed ourselves to? And I think from a very young age that we are all heroes for Mother Earth. I see ourselves as having special gifts, and they are different for everyone. But the society we live in, and Nietzsche also writes about that, tries to avoid us tapping into that gift. So when we take back our superhero gift for a new Earth that we want to build, then something incredible can happen. But for that, we need the right tools, we need strong people, a community, and the spaces that allow us to explore these gifts. And hyperhumanism is basically the medicine for all new Earth superheroes to tap into that latent potential.
Yeah, and hyperhumanism is very much about the collective. It's how do we make sure that we are transcending, incending together, understanding that, yeah, we may not be human yet, that we may have been human and lost that humanity through our technology designs, through this very technocentric perspective that soothed us into almost non-existence. With the scroll rotting, with the constant distraction, with the ever increasing convenience, this one button solution for everything. Get me a girlfriend, get me a job, get me a holiday. And it's like, reality doesn't work like that. So we've created this kind of false dichotomy where we are literally, not really feeling anything anymore, not really feeling that the reality. Zizek talks about the digital distance, that it's actually the indigenous that will survive what's coming because they know how to forage. They know what happens if the lights go off. Whereas all of us feel like we're connected because we have all of our friends on the tips of our fingertips, but it's an unreal illusion on top of an illusion. So we've built language on top of reality. Probably we had telepathy first, and then we lost telepathy because we created language. And now on top of language, we're creating the metaverse. And these are all levels of abstraction away from the core skill or the core belief or the core kind of felt experience of being in the world. So how do we understand that we are not human in the sense of a discrete entity? We are half bacteria. We are covered in fungi. So we're already 3 queendoms in this enmeshed, nested ecology. And how do we act like that? How do we act like that rather than this privileged humanism where we put ourselves as the apex creature saying, well, nature's just there for us to harvest. Nature's just there for us. Not realizing we are nature. We're very much embedded in this nested ecology. And if we start destroying, all the, for instance, in the UK, we've got no more, all the flies have gone because of the pesticides that we're using. And that means, great, we don't have flies, but we also don't have bees. And then we don't have pollination of, as Einstein says, if the bees disappear, we have 5 years left as humanity. And then what do the transhumans say? Don't worry, we're going to use drones to pollinate our
pollinators.
yeah,
Real.
drone pollinators. That's what they were already planning it. So it's like this is the crazy thing that we replace nature with technology that does such a much worse job of replicating what nature already does. How do we really connect to that with hyperhumanism? How do we make sure that we are utilizing all of those endotechnologies? How do we make sure that we can create these stacks that create lasting change, like the master meditators who have changed their frontal lobes, or even taxi drivers that learn the knowledge, which is learning every street in London, not just where they are, those streets, but also where the bends of those roads are.
Yeah.
So they have these memory palaces in their heads that are virtual reality. They are a form of virtual reality. So how do we return to those times of the ancient Greek mystery schools where those orators didn't write anything down? They had these 7-hour speeches that they basically managed to trigger those 7-hour speeches because they mapped bits of virtual architecture. So an amphitheater, they would have an amphitheater in their minds, and they would map different parts of that 7-hour speech in that structure. And all they then needed to do was go through that structure to trigger the whole 7-hour speech without writing any of it down. So what did they have then that we've lost and may regain through the use of things like mixed reality, which is again like a ginormous memory palace? But we have to be learning from the past and learning from the future to really get this hyperhuman vision alive.
Man, most people can't even remember their shopping list of 7 items, let alone a 7-hour speech. What a chasm that we have created in our society in pursuit of comfort and convenience.
That's right.
Oh, and look what it's doing to our bodies as well as our minds. We have a very narrow temperature range, an incredibly small tolerance for what we can actually, accept as reasonable. And we're just weak and we're rigid and we're inflexible. We're not adaptive. And there's no strength in us, and the cognitive capacity that we have to imagine now is just so diminished. And I think that's what I'm so excited about in hyperhumanism, is it really feels like an alternative human story of progress that really does compete with the transhumanist wave. Because there are so many people in the Bay Area that are all in on transhumanism. It might sound like some crazy sci-fi, utopian, Scientological religion, but some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world are all in on transhumanism. So how would you say, Carl, hyperhumanism sits alongside the transhumanist dream?
So transhumanism is already here. If you have a phone and you're dependent on that device, you are already a cyborg. You are already transhuman. Whereas hyperhumanism is the North Star. This is where we should be headed. And it's the fork in the road time. It's like we are the resistance to the Neuralink, right? So Neuralink is installing your phone in your brain. It's getting rid of any distance between your thinking and your actualizing. And that sounds great on paper, but the problem is how many people are mentally unwell? How many people are having thoughts about chucking themselves under a bus? And that's kind of an instinctive thought that they're having. So unfortunately, if you have that thought and then that reality is so not a distance anymore, there's no distance between the thought and the reality of it happening. I think that's probably the worst time to be having this installation. And also the human body, if you have a splinter in your finger, the whole body becomes the finger. That splinter becomes the central focus, and you can't really or if you have a chipped nail. So it's like your body will eject anything that's foreign to it. And look at all the monkeys that have died in the testing of the Neuralink. I mean, absolutely fine and we've had brain-computer interfaces for years, nothing new about them, but it's generally for people that have lost a sense. It's for the disabled who want to regain motion or want to regain sight or whatever. That makes sense. But we are in our sovereign bodies, fully hyperhuman. If we accept the fact that we don't have 5 senses, we have 30 senses. We have all of these senses and how many people are using those senses? How many people are even aware of them? So this is really what I've learned from exploring consciousness from all those different angles, from taking DMT and having my brain scanned, from being the first person in the world to do DMT extended, where they've injected me intravenously in a continuous feed. And again, you can see that technology from a perspective of transhumanism or hyperhumanism.
Yeah.
And I'm working alongside Andrew Gallimore, and Andrew's vision is very transhuman. He thinks that we can live indefinitely in hyperspace. Some people are already living indefinitely in hyperspace because they've created altered traits. They've created lasting change. They're master meditators. They've become ascended masters. They're building the rainbow body. They're learning to die before they die. But unfortunately, a lot of these technologies will atrophy your ability to pass. And one of my big learnings about DMT is that, maybe be careful of how much you consume whilst alive, because maybe it is the thing that takes you across. Maybe it is those guides that come, and you don't want to cry wolf too often.
Yeah. Wow, man. I've only experienced DMT once. It was 5-MeO. It was really interesting that we were talking about Neuralink just before this, because the whole journey was about this bridge and a fork in the road that consciousness is making in our lifetime, where for whatever reason, there's this alternative sphere of consciousness that is being born out of Neuralink and X and SpaceX and Starlink. It's a constellation of consciousness that appears new to us. And it's trying to separate itself from the organic architecture of cellular biology and the consciousness grid that's existed for all of history. And it's interesting hearing you talk about, this almost interoceptive reticence to go too deep into some of these states of consciousness, because you're witnessing, I guess, the human ego and the hubris, which has been the fall of man repeatedly over and over again throughout history. And it's like, hey, hang on a second, maybe there's something here that we don't fully understand. And this to me is where the sacred comes in, and this is where indigenous worldview comes in, and this is where honor for all of life comes in. It's like, okay, in our scientific rationalist reductionist worldview, we may understand a lot of things, but we also might be missing the big picture. And I feel like you have a really interesting balance in your work of honoring both the really brilliant, empirical, analytical, rational mind and also the mystical, uncertain, unknowing, and having that balance. Like, how did you get to that place? And how do you feel the world can cultivate more of this? Because it feels like it's a missing balance in our society.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in technology, and I've also had many transpersonal experiences which just happened without any kind of warning, without any substance being involved. I had an out-of-body experience at 27 where I walked into an empty room in Brighton in my friend's flat and went out of body straight into a beam of light. And I was standing up, and suddenly I'd become this ginormous beam of light, and I couldn't understand what had transpired. And then I'm rotating in this wheel of light. And I'm being told by this disincarnate voice, you're not Carl, you're having the experience of being Carl. And suddenly I see 8 other beams of light in this wheel of light appear. And I'm like, and then I'm being told, your soul is inhabiting 9 bodies in parallel. And you know, you're trying to comprehend it, but you're feeling it. It's not something you're like, it's a felt experience of being light, of being in this wheel of light. And then this voice says, look up, because your body is in a larger body of light as well. And before I could do that, my friend starts to call me from downstairs. He's calling my name, and I'm being poured back into my body. And as I'm being poured back in, I'm told 2 more things. There is no death, and tell everybody. And then I just came round, and I'm still standing there, and I'm like, what was that? And that was 10 years before I ever discovered DMT. I searched out for DMT thinking that was what it was. It was an endogenous DMT hit. But when I did discover DMT, it was nothing like that.
No. Sounds like
And then 13 years later, I had a life review. A life review is a very common phenomenology that people have before death, generally. It's a near-death experience. But in that experience, I was able to have episodic chunks of my life replayed to me. Everything was recorded. Everything was available to me. But what was amazing, and maybe because of that out-of-body experience, I decided to leave my body inside the life review. So I was already in a double consciousness, because I was in my consciousness as I am now talking to you. And then I was in my consciousness going backwards. So I was in a double consciousness. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to try and leave my body. And I went into a table, and I became wood consciousness. And I experienced the time of wood consciousness and how much slower that time was, and how much more time there was in the wood consciousness. And then I decided to go into other bodies and become other people and experience what it was like to be them and me at the same time. You know, so triple consciousness. And this idea that, you know, in death, I think what we have is our life as a product. We have our life back as a product. And that means that you probably experience what you've done to somebody as them and you at the same time for ultimate learning. So your life is a playground of a point of view. You're driving a point of view in life, but in death, you have the field of view, which means you can go into any plant, any experience, any person, any book, any film, be the actors, be the authors, because that's the full matrix. That's the real matrix. And I think that this means you have a real responsibility, which is to drive the point of view, to access the field of view in that rainbow body state. So be very careful where you travel. Go to the Amazon, because then you can become all of the Amazon. If you don't go to the Amazon, you'll never be the Amazon. So you have to be there. You have to go to these places to become those places. That's the importance of being in the world, not being in a virtual representation of the world. You know, you have to be in the site-specific experience. This is why using the virtual to create the actual. You know, we're creating this retreat, and we're using the virtual to create that, but we're doing it in reality. The main meat of the experience is in person, because that's a bigger bandwidth. That's a much bigger bandwidth.
such an honor, such a gift. And I know we've only got a little sliver of time left here today, so let's jam on this retreat. We have the great honor of being with you in the flesh in Portugal, this beautiful regenerative village with a river of living water flowing through, cascading off a mountain. What called you to join us from December 7th to 14th? What are you offering, and what are you most excited about?
So I'm going to offer a multiple of different Holotechnica protocols. So we're going to look at different types of technology for creating these altered traits. We're going to look at different types of activation. Shakti mat activation with breathwork, for instance, will be one. And if you combine the Shakti mat, and if people don't know what Shakti mats are, this is acupressure. And you stand, or you put your hands into the Shakti mat. Your hands and your feet are portals to the rest of your body. So your heart is always in the middle of your hand or in the middle of your foot. And if you actually use a Shakti mat, you can be a detective of your whole body. So you can start to detect whether you've got a problem with your kidneys or your liver, and then you can push into that, and you can start to actually connect to those organs. But if you then do breath work, after you've done 20 minutes of a Shakti mat activation, your breath work will be massively enhanced because of that limbic system being fired up first. So, that will be one thing we're going to bring a lot of elixirs from ancient Egypt and ancient India, because one of the things that I'm really interested in with the Holotechnica is combining lineages from South America with the traditional medicines from South America, which we know and love, but not many people know that saffron, if you take saffron, that's your MDMA. That's your modern day MDMA. It's probably more potent than MDMA. If you take frankincense and myrrh is your modern day Valium. That's your Xanax. That's your like going to sleep. So the Egyptians had these medicines, and the Indian lineages, they've had the same types of medicines, but very different. Blue lotus, for instance, there was news came out yesterday of a concoction that the ancient Egyptians were taking. I've just come back from a 12-day adventure in ancient Egypt and been activated in 7 private permissions, going underneath the Giza Plateau into the crystalline waters that are still there, and intact sarcophagi 10,000 years old that's under the water that you can see. It's about understanding the importance of medicine, activation in space, understanding that you have this amount of senses that are untapped, unlocked. So we're going to learn about hyperhumanism. We're going to learn about how do we really become human? How do we really understand that we are a nested ecology? We're going to be doing many different examples from the buffet of endotechnologies. I'm going to teach you about cyberdelics. We're going to bring a Roxiva light so you can try flicker. We're going to combine flicker with sound. So I'm going to bring a whole roster of some of the best examples from sound as a cyberdelic from the Museum of Consciousness, which is basically a huge project from Oxford University that I've been running for 5 years. So we've got 100 artists in the museum, including people like John Hopkins. We've got Tom Middleton. We're having all of these artists come to us on the proviso that in 20 minutes they're asked, and the challenge to them is, can you change consciousness in 20 minutes just with functional sound? So sound made for purpose, sound that can be combined with your endo technologies or psychedelics or whatever it is, to create this Holotechnica stack. So we advise people to come to Oxford. We do these 7-hour shows, 5-hour shows. I did a big show in New York, 6 hours on a Sunday. People said to me, are you crazy? New Yorkers won't sit still for 20 minutes, especially on a Sunday. But I had 6-hour show in Brooklyn, a huge warehouse with surround sound, and we could have sold out 4 times over because everyone was desperate for this deep, long form experience where they come and shut their eyes, they go into their own imagination, and they recharge that imagination, they recharge that muscle, because at the moment we're designing everything short form because we're told everyone's got ADHD. That's why everyone's got ADHD, because we're only creating this bite-sized content. It's completely short. I mean, obviously there's, and I've been pulled up on this, but a lot of ADHD is kind of chemical imbalance, etc. But a lot of people are sort of creating this kind of pseudo ADHD because of the fact that we do not go into our own imaginations. We do not shut our eyes. We do not, really transport ourselves into these spaces that have potential to reignite our humanity.
So Carl's work better than many people. Me, our work together. What are you most excited about having Carl on board at the Ascension?
See, this whole quest we're on, and we also don't know all the answers, is how do we have a new approach to leadership in this new dawn that is unfolding right now. And especially as we also invite other regenerative leaders for this retreat, we want to open up this possibility for them to understand that you have a direct responsibility of your own mental state, and you can shape your state of consciousness by endotechnologies, by the choices you make, and you're empowered by so many things. The earth supports us infinitely, and especially when you have someone like Carl with us that knows all the different ways of how you can create a hemisync between left and right brain, relax the body deeply, and go into that states where you function as a human being in the most flowing and sharp state. And all these leaders will be like, wow, there's an actual buffet. Yeah, there's so many ways of how I can tap into my strongest self. And from that point of firmness, I can really have a powerful, positive, and beautiful impact on the planet. If I know that I am the earth, I want to make sure that the best the earth has to offer alchemizes a state where I can be of value and offer my gift to the planet. And that's where hyperhumanism comes in. And that's where we can weave together biohacking, regenerative leadership, and hyperhumanism into something entirely new.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add to that. I mean, I think it's about this regeneration, right? So I did a 9-month fellowship with the bioleadership group here in the UK and became a fellow, learning how to apply regenerative principles to different fields of experience. So whether that's education, whether that's business, whether that's technology, how do we be regenerative in our technology use? Whether we're creating those technologies, how do we make sure that we don't just sustain what's already broken? Sustainability is not enough. We need to regenerate. We need to actually, with our projects, we need to think about what is it that we're doing now that's going to be useful for the next 5 generations. So it's this inter and multi-generational project. You know, a lot of people only think about what they're going to do for the next week. They don't think about how useful what they're doing is going to be for the generations to come.
That's why I'm here, man. I got 2 young boys, and I want them to be the ever new consciousness bliss that I am, that you are, that we all are. I want them to break through that screen of society that says you're not enough, you need something else to be whole. I want them to be freed. Not only just to be in the museum of consciousness and to witness it all, but to be in the playground and have fun and engage with it all with love and compassion. And when we can move through our shadows and integrate it all into a whole sense of self that is not just this body, these hands, this mind, but really is that pure loving awareness, we can do anything. And that's what I'm most excited about, is seeing the limitless potential in every single human being that is waking up to this reality. Because, like, look at you, Carl. Look at what you're doing. If consciousness, the universe experiencing itself, it is having so much fun through you. Like, it is loving life. And I'm loving life just hearing about it. I can't wait, man, to just have a wonderful time having fruit from the vine, farm to table, hand-cooked meals, days together, stars in the sky. To just play and be and see what happens in this retreat. So thank you guys, man, for sharing your gifts. Thank you for coming together in this moment, and I'm so excited to be on this land with you in a matter of weeks.
Beautiful. Can't wait.
Awesome, man. Peace be with you, Carl. Enjoy the rest of your day, brother.
Cheers.
Bye, man.